Quarterback spot, we got ranked going with Jared Goff and Derek Carr, who I really do think is a nice streaming option this week. His running back picks for starts, Antonio Gibson and Kareem Hunt. That's despite Nick Chubb coming back. I still agree. I think Kareem Hunt's going to be fine. Wide receivers, Christian Kirk, who got hot last week, and Curtis Samuel, who's been hot for a couple of weeks. His tight ends this week, a couple of Iowa Hawkeyes, TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant, and I don't believe that this was written by Kimmy Check, so I think that's going to be just fine. And defenses, the Eagles and the Cardinals, which may be a little bit of a surprise picking the Cardinals against the Buffalo Bills. But now that was nice enough from Adam Rank. Matt and I have our own picks for the week, so if you're going to go with a start of the week, Matt, who would it be?
Oh, all right, Marcus, raise your hand if you lost all trust in James Conner and any fantasy analyst to recommend starting him in week 9. My hand is raised. That's me. Yeah, and I lost trust in myself. Here's the thing. I'm flying Con Air again in week 10, trust issues and all. Here's the thing. Pittsburgh has fallen behind in each of the last 2 weeks, and the snap counts and touch counts for their running backs have been dismal as a result. I don't expect that in week 10 against the Bengals, who they've beaten in 9 straight meetings. The Steelers are going to win. Plus, since he has allowed a top 10 running back in 3 straight games, and with Big Ben battling COVID restrictions and injured knees, it's likely Pittsburgh will have to rely heavily on Conner regardless of who starts at QB. By the way, 2 of those wins were by Mason Rudolph, so even if he starts, I'm not scared. Conner is a lock, in my opinion, for somewhere like 17 to 22 fantasy points, which will slot him in between a high-end RB2 and a strong RB1. I think you can go back to him this week. Kind of a little bit jaded, but do it.
I certainly understand the trepidation. Like I think last week was a shock to the system for everybody because we thought that he was just going to run wild against the Cowboys, and then the game script sort of worked against him. I also would like for the Steelers to stop giving goal line opportunities. It's like Chase Claypool and Benny Snell. Give them to your main running back. Let him just run it on in, please. I'm going to go with Nick Chubb, and you saw Kareem Hunt on Adam Rank's list. I still think there's opportunity for both of these guys to eat. We have seen it during the year when Chubb was there early in the season. We know that the Browns want to run the football primarily, and this is a great opportunity for them to do that against the Houston Texans, giving up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to the position. They have allowed over 1,100 rushing yards to running backs and 10 rushing touchdowns to the position. Everything about this screams that it's going to be an opportunity for the Browns and Kevin Stefanski to do exactly what they want to do, which is to run the ball early and often. And I think there's going to be room, as I said, for both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt to eat against this defense. So if you have one or the other, you can put them in. You can start them both with confidence. And you can feel pretty good about how things are going to go this week. All right, so now your sleeper of the week, who's maybe a semi under the radar guy people should know.
Oh boy, I'm going way out on a limb for this one, Marcus, so hopefully you will bear with me. And the pun is intended because it's Nick Foles of the Bears. Ooh. Listen, he's coming off a season-high 22 fantasy points versus the Titans. He's had 16 plus in 3 of his last 4. Basically, he's been good in every good matchup and bad in every bad matchup, and the Vikings are a very good matchup on Monday Night Football. Since week 4, they're allowing the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and they had allowed a top 7 QB in 3 straight before last week's split Lions quarterback situation. This secondary for Minnesota is extremely injury depleted. Their highest rated healthy cornerback is Jeff Gladney, who's 114th highest graded PFF corner. So it is a mess back there. Plus, David Montgomery in the concussion protocol out of that Titans game. He's eaten up a lot of inefficient touches this season. I think that the Bears rely on Foles in this one if he's out or not full strength. And Foles gets himself a couple touchdowns and a few hundred yards, and you're feeling okay.
Look, we always get at least 1 or 2 big blow-up games from Nick Foles, so I think we might be due for one. So I don't think that is the craziest thing. Plus, we like spicy takes on this show, so that definitely fits into the spicy take category. My sleeper for the week is Eric Ebron, going back to that Pittsburgh Steelers offense and their matchup this week against and I think one. the Bengals have struggled against the tight end position all year long. They've given up a ton of yards. They've given up a lot of touchdowns to the position. And if you're talking about a sleeper tight end or a tight end that you're streaming this week, really all you're looking for is touchdown upside. And Ebron has that. You want a guy who's going to get looks when they get down near the end zone. So I think there's an opportunity for Ebron to sort of do that. And I think even more if it's not Ben Roethlisberger, I think that might even be a better deal for Ebron, just to get a big body target somewhere in the middle of the field for Mason Rudolph to throw the football to. So we know how bad tight end has been all season long, how frustrating it has been to fill that slot. So if you could just find a guy who catches the ball in the painted area at least once in a game, you can feel kind of okay about your tight end spot, and I think Eric Ebron has that potential for you in Week 10. There you go. That was Secure Starts presented by Visa. Well, Adam Rank was nice enough to not just leave his starts for the week. He also left us a bunch of sits for the week as well because, Adam Rank is nothing if not thorough. His quarterbacks to avoid: Matthew Stafford against Washington, Teddy Bridgewater against the Buccaneers. The running backs: Jerick McKinnon, who has just been such a crapshoot this year in the Niners backfield, and Melvin Gordon for the Broncos. Tyler Lockett, a surprising sit at wide receiver, along with DJ Moore. I have the sense DJ Moore's a sit because he's just frustrated, Rank, and Adam is just washing his hands of the whole situation. I understand. Tight ends: Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki. And defenses: the Broncos against the Raiders and the Panthers against a Bucs offense that is likely to be pretty salty this week after what happened on Monday Night Football. So those are Adam Rank's sits. Matt, who is the one player that you are urging people to avoid if possible this week?
Yeah, you saw a couple Panthers on that list. There's a reason for that. It's the Buccaneers defense. I'm sitting what I'm calling the Panthers wide receivers, but really it's basically DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. So I'm with Rank on DJ Moore. Listen, the Bucs have allowed only 2 top 20 wide receivers in their last 7 games and 0 top 12. Over that stretch, they've held Devontae Adams, Michael Thomas, and Keenan Allen outside the top 25. That is not good for Panthers wide receivers. And Moore, Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel have kind of taken turns being the best fantasy wide receiver for this team all year, which makes it hard to rely on any of the trio, even in good matchups. This is not a good matchup. Moore only has 7+ targets once in his last 7 games. Robbie Anderson really hasn't had a great game since week 5. Both guys had a decent game against Tampa Bay in week 2, but they both had double-digit targets to do that. And now that Curtis Samuel is kind of coming into his own and getting a lot of touches, I don't feel confident that either of those guys is going to get enough work to be happily started.
I agree. I'm very worried about the Panthers wide receivers this week. And Anderson, after a nice start to the season, has just kind of settled in. He's just been meh, I think, for the last few weeks. So you have a guy who's just being sort of average, put him against a good defense, and it is probably a situation that is best avoided if possible. I'm going to go with Joe Mixon. And I know we keep sort of touching on this Steelers-Bengals game. And, first off, you've got Mixon, who's sort of coming off an injury, and you're kind of concerned about, what his health is going to be coming back into this one. But this is also it's a different Bengals offense. We know that they have put the game on the shoulder of Joe Burrow and sort of let him go to work. It's a bad matchup to begin with against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are not giving them a whole lot to the running back position, so that is enough to make you concerned. In fact, the fewest fantasy points per game to running backs allowed by the Steelers, so that is already enough of a concern. You've got Mixon coming off an injury, and in his career against Pittsburgh, he's been just okay. Just one game with over 100 scrimmage yards against Pittsburgh so far for Mixon, and with the idea that I expect Pittsburgh to score a lot of points. I think after last week's poor showing, I imagine they're going to want to get off to a quick start. So that could certainly tilt the game script away from Mixon and maybe more toward Gio Bernard, who we know is sort of their designated pass catcher. So I'm sort of worried about Joe Mixon being on the field in this one and just kind of concerned about what he could possibly do. All right, last one. Star player that you are concerned about this week.
Oh boy. All right. I'm going with Lamar Jackson here. I mean, on the season, he's the QB 12, which is disappointing based on where you drafted him. 20 plus fantasy points only once in his last 4 games. These are his fantasy finishes since week 5, Marcus. 20th, 6th, 18th, 19th. That is not what you want out of Lamar Jackson. And he simply has not been connecting with Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown lately. And if you're not doing that in this offense, you're probably not doing much. And then this week, in primetime, he draws the Patriots defense. I know they're not quite what they were last year, but they've only allowed one top 15 quarterback all season. It was Russell Wilson. They smothered Josh Allen in week 8. And last year when they faced Jackson, Belichick held him to 163 passing yards, a TD, and a pick. He salvaged his fantasy day with 2 rushing touchdowns, but I'm not relying on that this week. He's still a top 10 quarterback in my rankings, but I am going to be wary of Lamar this week.
I'm very worried about Lamar. I feel like we can always sort of go back to him just because his rushing ability gives him a semi-safe floor. But in terms of throwing the football, it has not turned out, I think, the way we would have anticipated this year. And, I think there are a number of factors for that. But regardless, the bottom line is the production hasn't been what people were drafting when they spent probably a second or third round pick on Lamar Jackson. The big name that I'm really concerned about this week is Adam Thielen. And there are a number of reasons for this as well. I talked about the Vikings offense earlier and how they have understandably pivoted toward Dalvin Cook because he has been playing so well over the last few weeks. But also the Bears, it's just a bad matchup. We talked about what they did to Corey Davis last week, how they have shut down wide receivers, and they have traditionally done a good job of shutting down Adam Thielen. In 11 games against Chicago in his career, he has not yet hit 70 receiving yards in a ball game. So that means it's going to be really tough to get a pretty safe, solid floor out of Adam Thielen. Throw in the fact that, the Bears, if there is a place they are vulnerable, it is probably against the run. So you're really going to need Chicago. You would need Chicago to get out to a big lead and force the Vikings to throw the football. The problem is the Bears don't have the kind of offense that's conducive to them getting out to a big lead and forcing the opponent to throw. Although I do know, I know you had Nick Foles as a sleeper pick this week, so maybe it happens. Who knows? But at least everything by the numbers suggests this could be a fairly close game, and I don't know that it necessarily lends to Adam Thielen getting peppered with a whole bunch of targets there. So I get it. If you have to start him, I totally understand, but it's not one that I would be looking for a whole lot of production out of this week.